Hi, how you doing, and welcome back to another video on the channel. And it's a bit of a special video today because my wildcard chip is active ahead of game week 12 for my own team. So this video is going to be a bit different to the wildcard one we released earlier in the game week because that was a bit more of a generic wildcard team. And this one will relate to my own team, and like you, I've got different amounts of value tied up in specific players, which impacts my decisions moving forward. So whether you're wildcarding or not, hopefully this video helps you out with your own transfer decisions, and if it does, please do subscribe, like the video. The support is always really appreciated as we're a small channel trying to grow. Let's get into the team. So I'm going to start by talking about my team that was currently active before I decided to hit the wildcard chip, and I didn't hate it, to be honest. Would I tell someone to get this team in on a wildcard? No. But there's always a difference between buying players and then needing to sell them if you already own them. I did have 3 free transfers, and players that I owned were playing well. They just weren't scoring FPL points, and that's a bit of a problem when the game is Fantasy League. But it's one of those tricky situations where how long do you stick with players who aren't scoring? You know, players like Foden, maybe even Haaland's not scoring as much as you want, someone like Strand Larsen, and they're getting the chances, but it's just not converting into FPL points. And you always think, oh, maybe next week or maybe the week after, and sooner or later you've just got to bite the bullet and make the changes. So that's what I've decided to do. And not that this wildcard team that I'm going to show you is set in stone, but this is what I've got so far. So we're going to start with the goalkeepers, and I'm actually keeping hold of Raya. Now, all the prices for these players are what they're worth to my current team, so that's why Raya is showing 5.5 million here rather than 5.6 million, because I already own him. Now, Arsenal actually have some good defensive fixtures coming up. They've got Forest, West Ham, Everton, Palace and Ipswich in the next 7. So since I'm wildcarding, I don't necessarily need to make a change like that. I do think Arsenal's defence is quite consistent and they're getting players back from injury and suspension. I think moving forward, he's a really good option. But if I did want to save some money and upgrade elsewhere, he is a position that I could drop down to a 4.5 million keeper. And I might as well get in Fabianski since I'm allowed to make as many changes as I want in case I decide to bench boost one week. Now, I always use the bench boost in a week where I'd be happy to start all my bench players, regardless if it's a double game week or not. So straight after a wildcard or in the next couple of game weeks after a wildcard, that's a really good opportunity to bench boost. I think sometimes people put too much thought into the bench boost and it really impacts the transfers leading up to it. And then afterwards when you're trying to sort of trim your bench down again. So if you can prepare for a bench boost by using a wildcard, it just saves a lot of planning. So just a couple of changes in defence so far. Mikalenko and Gvardiol out, Colwill and Hall in. Now there's an option for a Man United defender here, but we just don't know who will play where for them. Whereas Colwill and Hall, they look locked in, and we all know about Chelsea's great fixtures. And I think whilst Colwill might not have a certain attacking threat, for 4.5 million, all you really want is for him to be able to play regularly, and he's definitely doing that. I was actually double Newcastle at the start of the season, and now it looks like they're coming good with less midweek fixtures. I think someone like Lewis Hall is a great option. You know, he's riding that high of being in the England call-up, and I think he's going to take that confidence into Newcastle's form after the international break. Now, I'm sticking with the rest for now. Someone like Face will be a third bench playing defender, and I brought him at the start of the season before it started at 4 million, and there's not really a need to sell someone like him because whilst I'd get 0.1 value, he is someone who does play 90 minutes every week, and you know, if I did need him to come on as an emergency, then I know he'll at least maybe get 1 or 2 points possibly. So I think he's someone that I am going to keep, and that value that I lose isn't really worth it, to be honest, for someone who's going to be sat on my bench at the back. Ipswich have a nice run of fixtures till game week 17, and I'll never have a problem benching a 4.5 million player anyway. Leif Davies, he does offer a lot of attacking threat as well. Ipswich aren't keeping clean sheets, but nobody is really, and I think at least he offers that attacking threat to sort of counter that. And at 4.5 million, like I say, it's not like I'm holding a load of value in the defence. And it's the same for Robinson really. Fulham actually have mixed fixtures, but they're playing well, and clean sheets are hard to come by anyway, so I might as well stick with these cheap defenders with some sort of attacking threat for the most part, and then I can rotate any of them in and out. I'll probably just play the players with the home fixtures because that's just more likely to get a clean sheet, but that then means that I'm not benching a 6 million player and then I'm thinking I've got to play them no matter what. It just gives me a bit more mental flexibility, I guess, when rotating the defence, and allows me to upgrade and invest that money elsewhere in the attack. So onto the midfield, and we've got 3 changes. Foden, Schade and Winks out, Bruno, Salah and Semenyo in. So I'm sticking with Mbuemo for now, but he will be getting sold in 2 weeks when the fixtures turn. I actually have quite a lot of value tied up in Mbuemo. I got him in at 7.1 million and he's now 7.9. So I'll be able to sell him for 7.5. So there's not really the need to get him out immediately. But his overall value only really comes into play if I'm going to want him back in. And judging by the fixtures that he's got coming up after the next 2 game weeks, I'm not going to want him back in. So that would just be a bit of advice. If you've got value tied up in a player, I see it as sort of, I'm getting 0.4 million back that I didn't have. I'm not looking at that. I'm losing 0.4 million from 7.5 to 7.9 if I'm not going to want him back in. It'd be a bit different if I was just taking him out for a couple of game weeks and then I'd transfer him back in. I'd probably keep hold of him. But if you've got a player and you're not looking at, you're thinking you want to sell him, but you don't want to lose the value, try and look at it that way around. It's a bit of a positive rather than a negative spin on it. I think Bruno is absolutely worth the risk on a wild card. It actually felt quite worse when I was looking at getting him in on a free transfer, because I was going to use my 3 free transfers, if you've seen my previous video for my Game Week 12 preview. And when you're getting him in on a free transfer, you think, oh, well, if it doesn't work out, I don't really have immediate large amounts of free transfers to take him back out again. So you won't want to use a free transfer to get someone like him in and then another one to come out. But if you're using a wildcard anyway, you've still got those transfers rolled over, which is a good rule change for FPL this season. So if it doesn't work out, it's quite easy then to just use one of those free transfers to swap him over to somebody else. But the plus side is that you're using that wildcard to get him in. The upside is that he scores points and it works out really well. So I think I'm also going to have Salah, and that means that I would be selling Haaland, but I have planned a route to get Haaland back when needed. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And not owning Salah has just hurt my rank enough. And it's, again, talk about at the start of the video, holding on to those players who you think are going to score points in the future. It's like saying, well, I'm not going to get Salah in because he's scored all these points and he won't keep scoring forever, and then he just keeps scoring forever. So sooner or later, you've just got to not admit defeat, but just acknowledge that you're missing out on FPL points, and he's an option that you can get in. So if I'm wildcarding, which I am, I would definitely recommend getting him in. Southampton away is also a really good captaincy fixture, so it makes even more sense because I'm going to get him in and then captain him. Semenyo is the first bench option, so Bournemouth have Brighton, Wolves, Ipswich, West Ham and Palace in the next 7, and we know how attacking he is. He's also someone that, depending on who I sold Mbuemo to in a few weeks, I wouldn't have a problem starting him either, no matter what the fixture is, because he's got that attacking threat. It's good that Bournemouth do have good fixtures, but it's a nice little safety net for my midfield to know if I did want to trim down the bench a bit, I could have Semenyo in that starting lineup. Now, Palmer is an obvious hold because he's someone I've already got in my team, and he's also a great captaincy option moving forward. I would say whether you're using free transfers or a wildcard, just get Palmer in. Even for this game week, Leicester City is a great fixture, but he should be an absolute priority for your lineup. So up front, we've got some good options, I think. I'm still sticking with Watkins. I still think he's going under the radar. I know if you've seen my videos recently or for the long term, I'm a big Watkins fan. I just think he's so consistent. But he also has 3 of his next 4 fixtures at home. It's difficult to justify him taking out because I already own him. So whilst it's not loads, I still hold 0.1 million value in him. And it's a bit different to the Mbuemo transfer because I actually think Watkins is a good hold for the near future. I've swapped Strand Larsen and Haaland out. Now, I still think both are really good options, and I could actually afford to keep Strand Larsen, which I might end up doing, or at least waiting till closer to the deadline to swap him to João Pedro, just because João Pedro, he has good upside as well as strong fixtures, but he could still be a minutes risk for the next couple. So keeping hold of Strand Larsen just until the deadline, or at least closer, and then maybe swapping to João Pedro depending on fitness news. Alexander Isak is someone we had at the start of the season, but I took him out after his injury. Now it looks time to get him back in. 4 returns in his last 3, and West Ham and Palace up next. He's got some difficult fixtures after that. I think he's got Liverpool, in one of the game weeks after that, but then his fixtures do turn good again. And like we always say, good form makes bad fixtures easy. I think he's got really good attacking potential for the future game weeks. So overall, shout out to Fantasy Football Hub. This team rating is 96%, which is great, and it's good confirmation bias to let me know that I'm on the right track. So we usually say as long as you're in sort of the mid to low 90s for this sort of thing, that's good enough, because there's so many variables in football that the data can't take into account. And as long as you're in the ballpark, you're doing okay. But that is a pretty good overall rating for my team. And the value is only 100.5 million. So whilst it's affordable for me, hopefully it's also affordable for those of you that are wildcarding as well. You might want to make one or two changes, maybe rotate some defenders about. But I do think it's quite a well-balanced squad for the next few game weeks. So the strengths for me are I keep my 3 free transfers. So I can use those in future game weeks. I'm not having to use them now and then thinking about when I'm going to use my wildcard. And I'm making about 7 or 8 changes here. So I'm not going to need to make any immediate changes in the next game week, which means I'll have 4 free transfers there. So 4 or 5 free transfers in the next couple of game weeks compared to 7 or 8 here. I'm not a million miles away from a what you would need to do in order to justify having a wildcard chip active for your team, because that's the amount of transfers that I'll have saved. It's quite good as sort of just as a bit of a reassurance to know that if my team doesn't work out, I've got those transfers already banked and I don't need to wait 3, 4, 5 weeks in order to build those transfers back up again. And it's quite easy to get Haaland back in. I've actually got a couple of pathways that I'm thinking of, which would be Salah and Jota out and Haaland and Winks back in. And it'd leave me with 6.3 million to get a Sancho or a Pedro Neto for when I take Mbeumo out as well. And I could also swap Watkins out in about 4 game weeks, which means I could do Watkins, Salah and Mbeumo out for Haaland, Winks and Saka if needed. So whilst Haaland is tricky to get back in, he's only really tricky to get back in if you've got 1 free transfer or no free transfers and you're waiting those game weeks in order to build up your free transfers again. He's someone I could get back in a single game week if I wanted to at any point. So the weaknesses I use is a wildcard. So I don't have that safety net of a wildcard to use in the next few game weeks. But like I said, I think I've countered that quite well by building up my free transfers beforehand. And there's no Man City. I do believe in Phil Foden. I think he's a good option moving forward, but he's just not the right time for him right now. We got him in for those good fixtures, and it's just not worked out. Even though he's been creating chances, it's not been turned into FPL points. So I don't really mind not having Man City at the moment, because they're also not playing very well. So I think FPL is a lot about getting on players at the right time. And you could own any player, and then in a single game week, they score you a hat-trick, and you'd be like, I knew it was right to hold so-and-so. But if they've just blanked for the last 5 weeks and they're going to blank for the next 5 game weeks, it's not a good decision to hold them for that amount of time, if that makes sense. So I think it's the right time to not get Man City players in. We wait a couple of game weeks, then we'll reevaluate at getting those players back in our lineup. So if this video has helped you out, please do subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you've got any questions of your own regarding transfer decisions moving forward. And let me know if you think I'm missing anyone in this team, or there's anyone that I've put in that I should be taking out, because playing a wildcard is kind of a big deal. You only get a couple in a season, so you do want to make sure it counts for the foreseeable future. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. Hopefully you're having a bit of a nice time in the international break, and I will see you in the next one.